Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from not the Commander's Core studio. If I'm recording all this properly, you might notice that I'm not in the normal setup. I've actually had some weirder setups in the past. I have recorded entirely in a closet. It was a decently sized closet, but I've had some pretty weird setups, so we're hoping that this goes well. I'll be back at the studio at some point, but for now, this is home. And yeah, with all that said, let's jump into the most expensive cards from last year, 2023. Now the year has wrapped. So again, starting the year off fresh and not the actual regular settings of the Commander's Core studio, but deciding to look back on the fondness of last year and some things that maybe weren't so fond with some of the pushed cards Wizards had and their price tag. So first up, we've got Orcs Bow Masters, kind of a controversial-ish card from last year where, yeah, right when it was spoiled, it was on the rules committee's, hey, this might get banned radar before the set even came out. Lord of the Rings had a lot of very powerful cards. Probably see some other ones in this. Regardless, this one is $46 for the least expensive version of it. A 1/1 Flashwork Archer for 1 and a black enters the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first they draw on each of their draw steps, deals 1 damage to any target that Massworks 1. Wizards, they kind of overly pushed this card and really could have fixed it in a lot of ways, and for whatever reason, they decided to put no stopgaps on this card at all. Again, if you're actually like, hey, we need to start punishing players for drawing a lot of cards, cool, there's a lot of ways to do that. This ain't it, because this again says basically damage to any target. Instead of it just being like the player that you're actually trying to punish is like, hey, that player just drew 7 cards, punish them. No, it's like, oh, hey, I'll take all this damage and just dish it out those other players or their creatures. It's really powerful and pretty crazy. So there's a reason why it is $46. Next up, Agathas Soul Cauldron. Apparently, I can't remember what they call these ones with like the Wizards magic symbol essentially in the bottom right of the card. Whatever that version of it is, this is the least expensive version. There you go. $42.90. It's a ledger artifact for 2 mana. It says you may spend mana or mana of any color to activate abilities of creatures you control. Creature control with counters on them have all active abilities of all creature cards exile with it. Tap, exile a card from a graveyard. When a creature is exiled this way, you get a counter to our creature you control. Yeah, there's some pretty crazy things that you can do this. I think this is actually having an impact on other formats as well outside of Commander, hence why it is so expensive. It's also a mythic, so there you go. Moving on. Yeah, the One Ring had to show up on this list. There's a lot of different versions of this card, including the 1 of 1, which of course, technically, I guess, is the most expensive card out of, everything, being at 2.6 million or whatever it was, 2.7 million. Who's counting? Anyways, regardless, on this episode, I'm taking the least expensive versions of these cards. Apparently, this one is it, where it's just like, hey, there's the ring in Golem's hand, right over there. $41.35, still incredibly expensive for the least expensive version of this ledger artifact for 4 mana. Indestructible, enters the battlefield. If you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. There we go. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burning counter on it. Put a burning counter on it by tapping it, and then draw a card for each burning counter on it. This card does way too much for what it is. It really didn't need to be indestructible, although obviously lore-wise, I said floor-wise, flavor-wise and lore-wise, apparently it's floor-wise. It does make sense, but also, yeah, hey, gives you protection from everything when it enters if you cast it, and then also being able to draw you a certain amount of cards again in any color with very little downside to that. Being able to untap and do it again can kind of get around essentially that kind of thing, and also proliferating it to make it quicker. Yeah, and maybe bouncing it back to your hand to avoid losing life and then replaying it. There's a lot of crazy things you can do with this one, and there's a reason why it's so expensive. Moving on, Hunting Velociraptor, a 3/2 dinosaur for 2 in a red. First strike, this one is down to $32.25, so quite the drop down from the top 3, essentially. Dinosaur spells you cast have Prowl, 2 in a red. So this one is essentially, hey, yeah, you can utilize a lot of good things very well if they are dinosaurs. Being able to cast them for its Prowl causes you to deal comedy to a player this turn with a creature of any creature type, cheers creature type with it. Anyways, being able to utilize this in Dinosaur Tribal decks obviously can be an incredibly powerful thing. Be able to cheat out like Zakama essentially for just 3 mana. Yeah, that's very, very, very good. Yeah, Dinosaur Tribal decks are one of the most popular tribal decks out there, and this is going to be an expensive card being, in a, I can't remember what they called this exactly, like the Jurassic Park kind of like side cards essentially from Ixalan. So Yeah, there's a reason why. Again, high demand, low supply. It's going to be quite expensive. Next up, Monarch Dominus. This one's pretty apparent as to why it's so expensive. $31.71. 4/4 Phyrexian for 4 mana in total. If one of our tokens created your control, twice that mana tokens are created instead. Wizards has made this card in a couple of different iterations, essentially. This is just basically another Anointed Procession, but on a creature, so it can be your commander, which is just lovely. Number 2, 1 Phyrexian white, sacrifice 2 other artifacts, and our creatures get Indestructible counter on this. So again, typically, this kind of effect on a creature is more easy to deal with than, say, Anointed Procession, which is an enchantment, which is probably one of the hardest permanent types to deal with. This one, though, is like, nope, I've got a very easy way for basically just 1 mana and 4 life, most likely. Sacrifice some, those tokens they created, most likely. And there you go. I get an Indestructible counter on me, and I am hard to deal with. So, yeah, this is a card that can not only be a great commander, but also can fit in a ton of decks. Basically, any deck that has Anointed Procession is probably going to want this. Anointed Procession, Doubling Season, those kind of things. Moving on, we've got $24, Ravenous Tyrannosaurus. Again, in that kind of like side product of like the, I think it's Rex is the actual set symbol, but yes, Jurassic Park. Obviously, 6/6 dinosaur for 6 mana total in Gruul. Devour 3, enters battlefield, sacrifice any number of creatures. It enters with 3 times that many counters on it for each of those creatures. Whenever it attacks, it deals damage equal to its power to 1 other target creature. Excess damage is dealt by creature controller instead. That's quite nice. Basically, just a giant attack and being able to take out things, and then also being able to potentially take out opponents with that excess kind of like trample ability damage that this has. It's a dinosaur. Again, dinosaurs are incredibly popular when it comes to tribes, so yeah, there's a reason why with all those factors this is quite expensive. Next up, this one is coming from the Lord of the Rings precons as well, so again, more limited print run than being the actual set, obviously. 4th, Eorlingas. Yeah, I'm probably saying that name wrong. Anyway, sorcery for X red and a white. Create X/2/2 red humanoid creature tokens with trample and haste. Whenever one of our creatures you control deal combat damage to one of our players this turn, you become the Monarch. So this introduces a few things. Obviously, hey, a giant X spell where you can just dump a ton of mana into that and then make trampling and hasty human knights. Yeah, in a go wide strategy or one that utilizes a bunch of mana potentially, or just a bunch of like anthems. I don't know why I was tripping up on anthems. You can make a lot of use out of this, and it can be a great finisher for you. Or if you use it earlier in the game, you can utilize it as a great card advantage source by saying again, hey, let's introduce Monarch because I'm going to get through with at least 1 creature essentially on my opponents, and I will be able to gain Monarch. So yeah, a very unique card for what it does. There's a reason again why with the print run and what product it was in, it is $21.72. Moving on. Legolas Quick Reflexes, yet another card from the Lord of the Rings precons. Instant for a single green mana, split second, which is a mechanic, is a keyword we rarely see, an incredibly broken thing, essentially. As long as the spell's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities, unless your opponent has like a Willbender, because that's like a special action, which is all weird, essentially. Yeah, your opponents can't deal with this ever. This is something that is uncounterable, unstoppable. It can come out of absolutely nowhere. Untap target creature until end of turn it gains Hexproof reach, and whenever this creature comes tapped, deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature. A very good effect, essentially, that says, hey, oh, you're trying to destroy my creature. It has Hexproof. At the very least, it is that. You can basically say, yeah, you know what? You aren't targeting my creature, which is great. Obviously, it works incredibly well with commanders or things that actually want to untap and tap them again, ones that have tap abilities, because if you can just keep tapping it, you can keep taking up a lot of things. It's basically like a fight effect, but again, it's one-sided. It's just dealing that damage to its power. It's not actually fighting it. So being able to say, oh, okay, I've got my commander which has 6 power maybe. Cool, untap, tap with its ability, tap or hit that, take that out. Use another untap effect, take that out. Use another untap effect, take that out. This can be, well, also a protection spell on top of a removal spell for multiple things, so it's pretty crazy. Again, $21.23. Next up, Throne of Eldraine from the Wilds of Eldraine precons, I believe, or precon. Legendary artifact for 5 mana, enters the battlefield, choose a color, tap at 4 mana of the chosen color, spend this mana, only cast a monocolored spell of that color. 3, tap, draw 2 cards, spend only mana of the chosen color to activate this ability. I mean, this, again, it's one of those cards that's like Wizards really leans heavily sometimes into like, hey, we're helping out monocolor decks. Yes, that and some other things too. This one's a very, very, very good card, especially in monocolor decks where, again, with a 5 mana rock, you're expecting like Gilded Lotus potentially, where that's like tapping for 3 mana essentially, right? But that's of any color. This gives you 1 extra. It is more specific in that, yeah, it's only the color that you actually choose. And also you can only cast monocolored spells. So again, in monocolor deck, great, or 2-color deck, you could probably make use of this too. That being said, yeah, being able to tap for 4 mana is very, very, very efficient for 5. And then also being able to draw 2 cards for 3 mana repeatedly, that's pretty fantastic as well. So yeah, a very, very, very good card. Obviously, it is legendary as well, which isn't really a downside in Commander ever. Essentially, there's very few times where it is a downside. It's mostly an upside, and that if you're playing Legendary Tribal as well, you could potentially utilize this. That would be more specific Legendary Tribal because you probably don't want to get too far out of, 1 or 2 colors to do so. So again, $19.69. Next up, Elor Mother Machines, one of the first cards from this year that really kind of made a big splash. 4/7 Phyrexian Praetor with Vigilance that costs 5 mana in total. A permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of permanent control to trigger. That ability triggers additional time. Permanents entering the battlefield don't cause abilities of permanent your opponents control to trigger. Yeah, I mean, this again, like Orcs Bow Masters, was another card that even before this card came out, like the second was spoiled. I think there was like an article up there somewhere where it's like, hey, this is on like the rules committee's ban list potentially, because it is a good effect. I don't think this one should ever be banned, but yeah, being able to double up your own ETBs like a Panharmonicon Plus, because again, Panharmonicon only deals with artifacts and creatures. This is every permanent, and also a way to shut your opponents down on their ETB. So like a Torpor Orb, but just for your opponents. On a 4/7 Vigilant, potentially Commander or card in the 99. A very brutal effect, a very powerful effect. $18.69. Yeah, there's a reason why this one's quite expensive as well. Next up, this one's a crazy card from the Doctor Who not Secret Lair, precons, essentially. $18, instant for 1 and a white. All creatures gain Hexproof Indestructible out of turn. Players gain Hexproof until end of turn. Players can't lose lose life this turn. It can't lose the game or win the game this turn. So there's a lot of things going on with this one. Basically, it's like everything is protected. There are very few things that can deal with essentially any of this. No one's doing anything. There's some crazy things that can, it's kind of like it's a fairy's protection, but for everyone in a way, but not, there's no phasing involved. There are ways to still deal with those creatures, obviously. Like again, creatures gain Hexproof Indestructible. Cool, that doesn't deal with something that's like, hey, put all creatures back into their owner's hands. It's not targeting, like just, hey, bounce everything like a Whelming Wave. I mean, Whelming Wave's not, Leviathans or whatnot, but anything that can essentially bounce everything, this still doesn't stop that, because Hexproof Indestructible doesn't do that as long as it's not targeting. Cyclonic Rift does target. Also, ones that would be like, hey, put it all in the bottom of the library. That would do it as well, or on top of the library. But yeah, basically, hey, the boards aren't being touched, and then also players, are saying the same. This is again a way to be like, hey, everyone is saved, which is a pretty cool effect. It's one that you're obviously going to utilize for your own purposes and really help you out in your situations, or be like, hey, player over there, you're about to get taken out. You know what? Let's make a deal. All right. You can only help me throughout the rest of the game. When it comes to a one-on-one, obviously we'll do that, but you can't do anything negative to me at all throughout the rest of the game. You just got to help me take out these other players, and then we'll one-on-one at the end. So you can make some pretty cool deals with something like this to be like, I'll save you, but there is a catch to that. So there you go. $18, a pretty crazy effect. Moving on. Nissa Resurgent Animist, a really cool card, and one that's pretty reminiscent of a older card that is quite powerful and popular. $17.52, 3/3 Elf Scout that costs 2 and a green with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Then if the second time this ability is resolved this turn, reveal cards to the top of your library to reveal an elf or elemental. That card in your hand, the rest of the bottom of your library in random order. Basically like a Lotus Cobra plus. I mean, it does cost 1 more mana, sure. It is also legendary, which sure, that does have an effect somewhat. But also, yeah, just being able to get free mana whenever a land is about your control, that is very, 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 very powerful. Basically, your lands are rituals. If you play an Evolving Wilds, you crack it, you get 2 mana out of that. That's fantastic. But also, hey, just free card advantage off the top of your library. Very specific again. Elf or Elemental, but if you're playing in those tribal decks, there you go. Congratulations, you've got free card advantage off of this, which is fantastic. Again, only the second time it resolves this turn, but again, it can resolve on your opponent's turns as well. If you've got, again, Evolving Wilds on their turn, crack it, whatever. I guess you have to have 2, maybe a ramp spell in there too. But yeah, keep all that in mind. Very, very good card. Moving on, welcome to Jurassic Park. Again, another Jurassic Park card. Again, when it comes to like these kind of like offshoots of sets that may not have, again, the same kind of print run, obviously, as the main set, yeah, when cards get popular out of those, they're going to be more expensive because supply and demand. A Saga for 1 green. First one, for each opponent up to 1 target non-creature artifact they control comes a 0/4 wall artifact creature with Defender for as long as you control this Saga. The second one, create a 3/3 dinosaur creature token trample against haste on the turn. Third one, destroy all walls, exile this Saga, then return to the battlefield transformed under your control. It flips over into Jurassic Park. There you go. Each dinosaur card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost equal to its mana cost plus 3 other cards from your graveyard. Tap, add green for each dinosaur you control. So kind of like a Gaia's Cradle in a way. I mean, it takes steps to actually get to, obviously. But for your Dinosaur Tribal deck, again, Dinosaur Tribal is incredibly popular. So yeah, there's a reason why. Again, with all those factors, this one is quite popular. I also think I actually clicked into Atraxa earlier, so you might have seen that. Regardless, Atraxa Grand Unifier, $17.21. A 7/7 Phyrexian Angel for 3 in Atraxa colors. Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink. Enters the battlefield to reveal the top 10 cards of your library for each card type and put a card type from among the revealed cards into your hand, but the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. This is the card that essentially showed, hey, yeah, you know what? Battles are a thing because it listed all those things, including battles. So this is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 types, essentially, if I'm counting correctly. Yeah, you've got the potential on an ETB. Again, unlike the One Ring, which had a slight, you know, build training rules on it where it's like, hey, let's just stop it from being like just blink it and get the effect because it has the cast requirement. This doesn't have a cast requirement, meaning that, you know what, if you just blink it, you probably get 4, maybe 5 cards off the top of your library in your hand, which is pretty crazy for an amount of card advantage. Up to 8. Yeah, there's gonna be times we only get like 2 or 3, but still, that's absurd. And a commander that, again, can just be a 2-shot to 1-shot KO very, very quickly, very, very easily. Again, Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink, all those lovely things. Yeah, you're going to be able to do some pretty crazy things with this in the command zone or in the 99 of a deck, especially, again, a blink deck that can really use and abuse it. Next up, Shieldred, yet another Phyrexian here. 4/5 Phyrexian Praetor with Menace that costs 3 black. When it enters the battlefield, you just want to sacrifice a non-token creature or planeswalker. So again, actually getting rid of more valuable, potentially, you know, non-token creatures and planeswalkers. 4 in a black, exile, return to the battlefield. Transformed only if that opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. You can get to that quite easily. The True Scriptures, first one for each opponent is for up to 1 target creature planeswalker that player controls. The second one, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. The third one, all creature cards from all graveyards on the battlefield under your control, exile, return to the battlefield, and it flips back over. There you go. So you get to do it again to make your opponent sacrifice more things. So kind of like a pretty brutal effect again on ETB, making your opponent sacrifice. That's lovely. You know, building up that graveyard. Once that is, you flip it, you get some great things out of it, and yeah, you get to basically Rise of the Dark Realms, which is typically a game-ending play, and if not, set yourself up again for the exact same play. $17 right there. Moving on, Wilds of Eldraine. Again, I believe this is from the precons. Court of Garenbring precon. Enchanted for 1 green. Enters battlefield, you become the Monarch. Players love the Monarch. Many players do, and so basically anything that's like, hey, Monarch. Yeah, if that introduced, it usually kind of adds a little bit to its popularity. At the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 counters among 2 target creatures, and if you're the Monarch, double the number of counters on each creature you control. Yeah, that's why this one is $16. That little text at the end of it, like, hey, if this is the case, double it. Which, yeah, counter decks out there, plus mostly counter builds, whatever they are going to really want a card like this that can potentially double it again for just 3 mana. And again, it introduces the Monarch to give you card advantage on top of that. Yeah, you got to protect yourself to actually really take advantage of this one. Plenty of ways to do that when you have a massive army with a lot of massive creatures that get even more massive. Next up, Tali Primal Conqueror. Yeah, this one is gross. A 7/7 Elder Dinosaur Trample for 7 mana. Just 1 extra mana from the original Atali. And they're like, you know what? Let's really step it up. When it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library to exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled without paying the mana cost. Basically, you just get a bunch of things for free. You get 4 things for free off the top of everyone's libraries. With regular Atali, it's like, hey, it's random. You might hit something that doesn't really help you. This one's like, no, we're going to dig down into stuff that actually helps. 9 in a Phyrexian green, transform it. On top of that, on the backside, 11/11 trample Indestructible. Basically, infect Atali. It's worded differently. Deals counter to a player, they get that many poison counters. Basically, infect minus like the -1/- counters on creatures. So slightly worse, but not really all that much worse. Being able to just, you know, one-shot a player with the backside of this is pretty crazy. So it's a commander that is incredibly powerful front side and backside. If you happen to be playing against a blink deck or a clone deck, they're in big trouble because you just keep getting that ETB again and again and again. And worst comes to worst, you're like, flip it over, take you out in one shot. Yeah, a crazy good card. Again, the 99 of a deck, or yeah, especially as a commander too. Moving on. Dinosaurs on a spaceship. That's the card's name. 7/7 Dinosaur Vigilant and Trample. 4 and Boros colors. Other dinosaurs you control get +1, have Vigilance and Trample. That's already just a very good effect, especially again for Dinosaur Tribal builds, which are going to be quite popular. So not only did Dinosaur Tribal fans get Ixalan this year, they also got Doctor Who helping them out too. Suspend 4 for 5 mana in total. Whenever a time counter is removed from it, and while it's exiled, you get a 2/2 red and white dinosaur creature with flying and haste. Yeah, being able to get just free dinosaurs while it's suspended is great. For just 5 mana, you are going to be getting, what, like 4 of those tokens, and then also this, which then pumps them and gives them Vigilance and Trample, and then also helps your team. $16.43 in total. There's a reason why. Moving on, the reason for the season, though, Roaming Throne. My goodness, when this was spoiled, it was like, that's really good. And then you just look into it further, like, oh no, oh no, oh no. This like affects an absurd amount of commanders. Eddie and I did an entire episode on this commander. Make sure you check that one out at some point, or this commander, this card in commander. Absolutely absurd. $16.23. That's only going to go up further and further and further as time goes on, because players will be like, oh, that works with my commander. Oh, that works with my commander. Oh, that works with my commander. It works with an absurd amount of commanders. Basically, does your commander have a triggered ability? Cool. Yeah, you want it. A 4/4 artifact creature golem ward 2 that costs 4. Enters battlefield just like creature type. It is the chosen type just as other types. If a triggered ability of another creature you control of the chosen type triggers the whole time. If you have a tribal deck, just look through your deck list and be like, oh, how many triggered abilities do I have? 10? Cool. Yeah, probably great in that. If your commander has one, probably great in that. Again, outside of tribal, it's still absurd. It's even more absurd because there's just commanders that are like, yeah, I do this. Oh, do it again. Like, I think we looked at the top 10 commanders currently, and 7 of them could utilize this incredibly well. And some are just broken with this, just absolutely broken. Like Eddie brought up Rada Drabic, and I was like, oh God, that's really good. And then look further, it's like, oh no, oh no, oh no. It's absurd. So yeah, it's a crazy good card that is only going to get more expensive as time goes on. And we'll see how Wizards reprints that one. They knew what they were doing when they pushed that one out. They're like, it can fit into so many decks. Ha ha ha. Chase card. Moving on. Beseech the Mirror. More specific because of its mana value, mana cost. Source for 1 black, black, black. Bargain. You may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. Search life for a card. Exile face down, then shuffle. A spell is bargain. You may cast the exile card that paying its mana cost. The spell's mana value is 4 or less. Put the exile card in your hand if it wasn't cast this way. $16. This, at the very least, is a slightly harder to cast Diabolic Tutor, whichever one is for. I always mix those up. I don't know why. Anyways, which is already an incredibly popular card, one of the most popular cards out there. That being said, if you've got an artifact, enchantment, or token you want to sacrifice, some things you actually do want to sacrifice. Again, you're in black, probably aristocrat style colors, right? Sacrificing things can actually be good. Cool, you get to cast that for free. So it's basically like you didn't even pay for your tutor. If you went and got something that's like 4 mana, you're like, cool, I just paid 4 mana, cast a 4 mana thing out of my library. Yeah, this is an absurd tutor effect. Moving on, speaking of absurd, Oher Tak, Deepest Foundation. I believe I'm saying that right. I think Eddie told me it's Oher, I believe. So blame Eddie if I'm wrong. It's $15.66. A 6/6 Ledge Creature God with Vigilance that costs 6 mana in total. If one or more creature tokens are created in your control, 3 times that many of those tokens are created instead. Wizards, please, please, with 2024 here, okay? Just listen a little bit. You're leaning on this doubling, tripling a bit too much, and it's really not original, and it's getting kind of boring, okay? Okay? Yeah, there's a reason why this one's obviously popular. There's a reason why it's expensive. It's because Wizards knew that, hey, if we put a doubling effect out there, ooh, people love doubling. Oh, wait. Well, let's do tripling. Ooh, people love that even more. Wow. Now, unlike the Monarch that we talked about earlier, this, thank goodness, does not triple up just any kind of a token. It is specific to creature tokens. Thank goodness, or this one would be like $300, maybe. Anyways, this is just an absurd effect that's like, hey, oh, I made 1 token, now it's 3. Wow. Oh, I made like 10. Oh, no, it's 30. I win the game. When it dies, return to the battlefield, transform it under control, flips over. And this taps for a white mana. Pay 2 and a white tap, transform it. Only if you attack with 3 more creatures, this turn is a sorcery. They could have put like 12 on that and it wouldn't have mattered because, again, if you just utilize like 1 token generating effect while the front is there, you're gonna have a lot of creatures. Again, literally, if you just did 1 time, you just have like 1 tiny token that you made, it turned into 3, right? And then you just attack with those 3, and there you go. You can flip it right back. So yeah, it's hard to deal with, and it's just an absurd effect. Wizards, please stop with the triplers and the doublers. getting kind of old. Anyways, moving on. Calyx, Guided by Fate, a 2/2 Ledger Enchantment Creature Human Druid. I love it when they have like the type lines where it just barely fit on there, or like they have to just shrink the text and then just collapse it in too much. For 1 in Selesnya colors. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you get a counter target creature. Whenever it or enchanted creature you control deals counter to a player, you may create a token's copy of target non-ledger enchantment you control that's only once each turn. $15, $14.61 to be specific. Yeah, hey, if you've got enchantments, whether this is your commander or if it's an enchantment deck, you're gonna want to copy your best enchantment. So it's a pretty cool effect. Moving on, speaking of cool, Chimil, the inner sun, am I saying that right? Legendary artifact for 6 spells you control can't be countered. That's already just a giant draw of this card where it's like, you know what? Some of my opponents are blue players, and I just hate when they're countering my spells. So as long as I get like this through, it's like, ha, you can't do anything. At the beginning of your end step, discover 5. Discovers a very powerful thing. Kind of like Cascade, but slightly different. Regardless, being able to get free value off the top of your library that also just can't be countered is really, really absurd. So you have $4, 38 cents. Next up. Raise the Palisade. Yeah, if you have a tribal deck in blue, you're going to want this card most likely. It is sorcery speed, which that's fair. It's a wrath, basically. For 4 and a blue, choose a creature type, return all creatures that aren't the chosen type to their hands. Unless you're playing against Shapeshifter Tribal, you're probably hitting everything your opponents have. Maybe they keep like one thing in play. Or if you're playing like humans with this, then maybe your opponents have more of the, like a more broad creature type. Sure, but like you're playing like pirates, chances are your opponents have no pirates, and therefore it's a one-sided 5-mana board wipe. There's a reason why. Again, this was in a pre-con, so again, limited for one compared to others. It's $14.28 right now. Next up, Virtue Persistence. It's just kind of funny looking back through all these expensive cards, but like, oh yeah, the Virtues came out this year. Gross. Enchantment for 7 mana in total. Beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. We already had this effect, essentially. I can't remember the exact name of the card. Let me know in the comments below, but it's one of those like split hybrid mana Orzhov cards. It's gonna upset me that I can't remember that. That is basically the exact same thing. Now this one can fit into more decks out there because again, hybrid mana, to some people's not liking, can only fit in decks that have both Orzhov colors. This fits in just anything that has black. On top of that though, this has more flexibility in that it has locked win score of the adventure. Pay 1 in a black. Target creature gets -3/-3 until end turn you gain 2 life sorcery speed. Yeah, just happens to also be some removal and, gain some life. Nice. Yeah, very, very good effect. Next up, another Virtue. Virtue of Loyalty. $14.08 enchantment for 5 mana. Get your end step, get a counter each creature control, untap those creatures. Okay, so again, this one can play really well into ones that like, counters. There's a lot of counter decks out there. I think it's in the top 5 still, the most popular theme decks out there, +1 counters. Cool. On top of that, plays really well into, well, being able to untap your creatures and basically giving them kind of like pseudo vigilance so you're back for blocking. But also, like, if you've got a lot of creatures with like tap abilities, including maybe just even your commander, and you're like, I'd like to use that again. Cool. Being able to do that is pretty fantastic. On top of that, Ardenvale Fealty. For 1 and a white instant adventure, get a 2/2 white human knight creature token. Sorry, just white knight creature token, not human. With vigilance, can be quite effective as well for having that side of it. Next up, a really weird card, which is an uncommon, but it doesn't really matter from that product, I believe. 7/7 Dinosaur for 7 mana in total. As historic permanent enters the battlefield under control, it becomes a 7/7 dinosaur creature of other types. Very, very weird effect. Keep in mind, it doesn't say like non-token historic permanent. So basically, hey, you made a bunch of treasures. Now there's 7/7 dinosaurs and everyone's gone. Yeah, this is a pretty crazy effect. And there's a reason why it's quite expensive. Moving on, the most expensive battle out there from the year, Invasion of Ikoria, $13.11. 6 battle counters on it. I can't remember what they're called. X green, Battle Siege. When it enters the battlefield, search your library and or grave for a non-human creature card with mana value X less on the battlefield. If you search your library this way, they shuffle. Basically like a Green Sun Xena type effect, essentially. Court of Calling, one of those. Non-human, sure, but again, if you're using this in the deck, you probably don't care about that. See, a great tutor to get something in. And then also when you flip it, hey, you also got Xylorth Apex of Ikoria, which is crazy good. 8/8 reach. For each non-human creature you control, you may have the creature assign its combat damage, though we're in block, basically like Thorn Elemental for all your creatures. You'll say, hey, yeah, my creatures might not even have trample, but that doesn't matter because I'm just gonna swing and take you out because even if you block, you're gone. Goodbye. Next up, Moonshaker Cavalry. Yeah, we knew this one's gonna be expensive. $13. 6/6 Spirit Knight with flying for 8 mana in total in mono white. Basically a creature Crater Tooth, Crater Hoof Behemoth, there we got there. In white, enters the battlefield, creature control again, flying at +X/+X, while for X level creature you control, a giant pump effect for your team. That also gives them some evasion with that flying, and if that wasn't bad enough, now instead of being in green, you also have the ability to blink your creatures, which means that, yeah, you cloud shift this, and you're like, oh, cool, my creatures just got +10/+10. Now they get another +10/+10. You're all gone. Yeah. Galadriel's Dismissal, an instant for a single white mana, kicker for 2 and a white. Target creature phases out. The spell is kicked. Each creature target player controls phases out instead. Very, very tricky. Tricky hobbitses. That was a terrible. I wasn't even trying to do a golem there. Tricky hobbitses. There we go. That was a little better. Yeah, this is a very, very, very good card in that you can use it as a 1 mana save a creature, essentially, or you can use it as a 4 mana save your entire team, or that you can do this as a 4 mana get rid of someone's team and just swing out at them, and then they have no blockers. So yeah, it's a very good card, very flexible for 12 mana and 71 cents. Moving on, Charismatic Conqueror for a 2/2 Vampire Soldier with Vigilance for 1 and a white. I believe this was in a precon. Whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped and under opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, you create a 1/1 white vampire creature with lifelink. So basically, a dilemma for your opponents in that, like, hey, do things slower, basically, kind of like, not like taxing or stacks effect, but like, your thing's coming to play tapped is kind of stacksy-ish, and if you don't do that, I'm making a token army. And by the way, this is a low to the ground creature in a very, very, very popular tribal type vampire, a 2/2 with Vigilance. Lovely. Next up, Clever Concealment, instant for 2 white, convoke any number of target non-land permanents you control phase out. This is basically a free, get out of jail free card, kind of, in a way. Again, it has convoke, so if you have an army, you can just be like, okay, tap them. I'm tapped out, but I'll just tap them. I'll cast this, as long as some are white, I guess. Tap this, and all of a sudden, yeah, I just get to say any number against any number of non-lands, so you don't, like, lose, like, your tokens. I guess you wouldn't lose them anyways, they're phasing. But you can keep and play whatever you want to keep in, and then save whatever you want to save, and then all of a sudden, yeah, your things are phased out, and it's a very, very, very good effect, but we don't really see very often. Moving on, Savage Order, a source for 2, green. Just cost to cast this spell, sacrifice creature power 4 or greater, search live for a dinosaur creature card upon the battlefield, then shuffle it gains Indestructible of turn. I mean, this is pretty apparent. This is just good in a dinosaur deck because there you go. You can sacrifice any creature with power 4 or greater and go get any dinosaur, including some of the most massive ones out there. I mean, power 4 or greater, most of your dinosaurs are going to have that, so just go get some giant things. Have fun. $12.23. Yeah, again, a lot of these dinosaur cards are quite expensive. Ondu Spirit Dancer, a core cleric for 4 and a white, 3/3, $12, about $11.96. Whatever enchantment enters the battlefield under control, you may create a token. That's it. Do this only once each turn. Yep, making doubles of your enchantments. Again, once each turn, sure. But very, very, very effective. Obviously works well with like enchantment creatures too and populating as well. Moving on, Galta Stampede Tyrant. Yeah, basically Timmy's dream. A 12/12 Elder Dinosaur for trample with trample for 8 mana in total. Enters the battlefield, put any number of creature cards from your hand on the battlefield. Just dump your hand on the battlefield like, there's all my creatures, you're all gone, dinosaurs. Yeah, crazy good as a card 99, of course. Crazy good as a commander if you're set up properly. Luckily, it is only in mono green. If this was in like any other color where you're like, oh, okay, cool, I can clone it if I'm in blue. I can blink it if I'm in white. I can reanimate it quickly if I'm in black. I can create temporary clones in red, I guess. But yes, you don't really have too many ways to use and abuse this. There's a couple of like Conjurer's Closet, obviously. A couple ways to use and abuse that ETB, but still a very, very, very effective card. Next up, Flaming Tyrannosaurus, a 5/5 dinosaur for 7 mana in total with menace. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals 3 damage to any target, then get that many counters. Sorry, put a 1/1 counter on it. When it dies, it deals that much damage equal to its power to each opponent. $11.62. Yeah, this is just like, we're starting to really like, many players out there are really liking like impulse draw type, you know, when Prosper came around, it's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Anywhere outside my hand, cool, cast those, cool. All right, being able to just lightning bolt over and over again is pretty good. Also on top of that, just a ton of power damage when it's taken out, and also just becoming a bigger and bigger problem with menace too. That's quite nice. Moving on, Bitter Horn. This is Animus, a legendary artifact equipment, living weapon for 3 mana. If creature gets ++1, whenever creature attacks, I almost said dies. Whenever it attacks, you may search live for a basic land card by the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, equip 3. You got another way to basically ramp in any color, again, just on attack, doesn't have to get through and hit. Living weapon as well, so you can just swing out with that before it, I mean, it's going to get taken out. It's just a small little germ, but still equip quite easily. So kind of like, oh, what is it? Nissa's something, whatever. Nissa had something else that helped out too. We got Bone Horde Dinosaur, a 5/5 dinosaur dragon, mythic from Ixalan, flying first strike for 5 mana until beginning of your upkeep, exile top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile a land card this way, you get a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exile a non-land card this way, create a treasure token. Yeah, just very good. Basically, either extra token production. Again, at your upkeep, you're getting like 2 extra cards, temporary cards, but still. And then also, yeah, you just get free, dinosaurs and free treasure tokens. What's not to love about that? Moving on to Shauna's Tybinner. I love the art in these. A 3/2 Merfolk Wizard for 2 and a blue. Flash enters the battlefield. Counter up to 1 target activator triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact creature planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as it remains on the battlefield. Yeah, I mean, this basically is kind of a way to shut down many things. It can really shut down a commander in a way that, like, hey, okay, you played your commander, cool. Let's counter the activator triggered ability that you had in your commander, and all of a sudden, as long as I keep this in play, that's shut down. And even if you try to take this out, I could probably bounce it back to my hand and replay it on that or something else, essentially. Say $11.21. Moving on, Last March of the Ents. Again, Timmy's love this card. Sorcery for 8 mana. Can't be countered. Timmy's especially love that. Draw cards equal to greatest toughness among creatures you control. Then you may put any number of creature cards from your hand on the battlefield. Kind of like a Galta effect, basically. Like, hey, dump them all out there and probably win the game. Yeah, it's a giant effect. I mean, Timmy's love it even though it's a sorcery. And then we've got Palantir of Orthonek. I hope I'm saying that right. Ledger artifact for 3 mana. Beginning of your end step, put an influence counter on it and scry 2. Then target opponent may have you draw a card. If the player doesn't, you mill X cards or X the number of influence counters on it, and that player loses life equal to the total mana value of those cards. A high risk play for your opponents to be like, yeah, it's fine. I'll just take the, oh no, I lost so much life. So yeah, basically a great amount of potential card advantage out of this one and potential pain for your opponents. Moving on, Sofa Mayhem Dominus, yet another one of the Dominus is quite less expensive than Monarch, but still very expensive for me. $10.35, 5/4 for Rexian for 4 mana. Face source you control, deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, deals double that damage to that player or opponent instead. Yeah, great for group slug decks. Great for any kind of decks that utilize a bunch of non-creature damage, non-combat damage, I should say. For 1, Phyrexian Red, so basically 1 in 4 life. Discard 2 cards, get an indestructible counter on this. So very, very easy to make this really, really, really hard to deal with. Moving on, Titan of Lit Jara. This one's from, I think, Commander Masters, 6/6 Illusion, which I think its print run was not all that great because it didn't sell well because Wizards say a lot of bad things with it. Enters battlefield as a creature type, 6 mana. It is the chosen type to other types. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you draw a card for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. If you do, discard a card. Yeah, just a massive way to draw a massive amount of cards for basically any tribal deck that can utilize this. It is decently expensive, but again, you get that ETB, so you get a good amount of, I think, not Kindred Discovery. That's whatever that one. It's like something of a song. It's 4 mana. Regardless, a good amount of way to draw a lot of cards throughout the game with this. Moving on, all will be one. A card that is broken with Shalai Halar. Basically, I mean, there's a lot of things that are broken with Shalai Halar, but this is quite the good card. Enchantment for 5 mana. When you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, it's going to deal that much damage to an opponent creature an opponent controls or a planeswalker an opponent controls. Yeah, I'd say a lot. Again, if you are playing any kind of a +1 counter build, any kind of like a charge counter build, any kind of a proliferate deck, you're going to have a lot of ways to get a lot of counters on things, and actually it counts players too, right? So poison counters work too. I guess it also counts experience counters as well, so keep that in mind. But yeah, a way to just shut a lot of damage, and again, a combo card of sorts. Next up, Karn Legacy Reforged, dropping below $10, $9.88. Star Golem for 5 mana. Power touch equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. If you give your upkeep, add colors for each artifact you control. You can't spend this mana to cast non-artifact spells until end of turn. You don't lose this mana steps phase end. Just a giant burst, kind of like a Blink Moth Urn, essentially, but on a body that can get quite large again. Equal to the greatest mana value among artifacts you control. So at the very least, it's a 5/5. Can get much larger than that, though, and give you a ton of mana. Moving on, Urbrask, a 4/4 Phyrexian Prey with first strike for 4 mana. Whenever you cast an instant source spell, 1 damage to target opponent, and add red. So basically a mass ritual effect for you for your instants and sorceries. That can be a lot. Pay a single red mana, exile, return to the battlefield. Activate only if you've cast 3 red sorcery spells this turn. Very, very easy to do. Flips over to the Great Work. Deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control, so a mini board wipe potentially. Create 3 treasure tokens, so hey, here's some more mana. And then also the third one, until end of turn, you may cast in sorcery spells from any graveyard, not just your own. If a spell be cast this way, put a graveyard, exile it instead, then flip this back over essentially. Yeah, this is quite powerful, quite fun. And Urbesk finally gets its time in the sun. Moving on, Bloodletter of Aclazotz. Thank goodness for that specific mana cost. This helps not it being just every kind of deck out there that could utilize it, though many can justify it anyways. A 2/4 Vampire Demon with flying for 4 mana in total. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. Oh gosh, yeah, like a life loss doubler, but yeah, on a creature, quite effective. Right around $10 right there. Cavern Horde Dragon, a 6/6 dragon that costs 7 red, but you're never gonna pay that. Costs excess to cast for the greatest number of artifacts that opponent controls. So, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but typically your opponents will at least have 1 in play. And also, if they have a bunch of treasures, congratulations. They're gonna have to decide to either sacrifice their treasures or you're paying basically nothing for this. Flying Trample Haste. Whenever it deals counter to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. So again, the more artifacts they have, the better this is, and this can be quite broken and good. Speaking of broken, goodness, Wizards knew what they were doing when they printed this one. Delighted Halfling, a 1/2 Halfling Citizen for a single green mana, tap for a colorless. If it was just that, it would be Boreal Druid, basically, but slightly better, right? Because the toughness is better. But it also has tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana, only cast a legendary spell. That spell can't be countered. Ugh. This is like Birds of Paradise meets Cavern of Souls, basically. Yeah, a very, very, very good mana dork. One of the best ones out there. $9.20. Next up, Dino DNA, an artifact for a single mana. Imprint 1. Tap, exile target creature card from a graveyard. Activate sorcery, pay 6. Create tokens, copy a target creature card. Exile Dino DNA, except a 6/6 Dinosaur creature with trample. Activate sorcery. This is a crazy good card. It's one that can also be pretty broken as well. I mean, you can do some pretty crazy things with it. If you just had like a Peregrine Drake and then also some lands that can tap for more than 1, there you go. Yeah, there's some crazy things you can do with this one. Moving on, Fairy Mastermind. Goodness gracious, it's a good card. $8.76. 2/1 Fairy Rogue with flash and flying for 1 and a blue. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card, pay 3 and a blue. Each player draws a card. Oh, gross. Okay, so in Commander, again, all you need is players to draw a second card on their turn, and then you draw a card. You can also force that draw. You can also just force, like, wheel effects as well. Crazy amount of card advantage for you. Again, on a flash flyer, that's a 2/1 for just 2 mana. Next up, Broadside Bombardiers. Cool name. 2/2 Goblin Pirate with Menace and Haste for 3 mana in total. Both sacrifice another creature or artifact. It's going to deal damage equal to 2 plus sacrifice permanent's mana value to any target. Yeah, a pretty good effect. One that works well in certain kinds of decks out there that might want to sacrifice things, dish out damage. Menace Haste is nice as well, and also it is in a Commander Precon, so the supply's gonna be a little less. Next up, Nazgul. Hilarious that this one made it up here, but yeah, it makes sense. $8.52 for an uncommon in an actual set. We'll get to why. A 1/2 Wraith Knight with Death Touch that costs 3 mana in total enters the battlefield. The Ring Tempts you. Whenever the Ring Tempts you, get a counter on each Wraith you control, which of course this is. A deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgul. So this apparently is the least expensive Nazgul. There's like 9 different ones with different arts. I mean, they're same card, but different art. Yeah, I mean, any kind of like those Shadowborn Apostle type cards are like, hey, any number or again, specific number are going to be more expensive because decks can utilize more than one of them. So yeah, it's quite effective and really, really good when you get a lot of them out. Quite scary. Mithril Coat, yet another scary good card. Flash Indestructible equipment for 3 mana, equip 3. Enters battlefield, attached target legendary creature control. Creature's indestructible, has legendary. So basically a Darksteel Plate, but yeah, even better in certain circumstances because you can just flash it out and just attach it out of nowhere to your creature to be like, oh yeah, you thought you were going to deal with it? Nope. Thank you. Moving on, we've got Ghoulish Impetus. Enchant creature aura for 2 and a black. Enchant creature gets ++1, has Death Touch, and is goaded. When an enchant creature dies, return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. $7.74. Basically, bring this back again and again and again. It is goaded, and it is hard for your opponents to block, so yeah, have fun with that. Galadriel, Light of Valinor. A 3/3 Elf Noble for 2 in Bant colors. Alliance with other creature enters the battlefield in your control. Choose one that has been chosen this turn. Add 3 green. When a creature control, scry to draw a card. A lot of great effects again. Yeah, it's only once each, or one that has been chosen each turn, so you can get up to like 3 things though. It's still an absurd amount of value. And also there's ways to use and abuse this by blinking it, which you've got access to 2 colors that can really help blink it quite easily, so keep that in mind. Rise the Eldrazi is another great one, pretty crazy. Sorcery for 9 colors, so 12 mana in total. Can't be countered. Destroy target permanent. Target player draws 4 cards. Take an extra turn for this one. Exile Rise the Eldrazi. Lots of great things that you absolutely love with this one. Yeah, I mean, if you're in a colorless deck, you probably have a lot of ways to just generate a ton of mana very quickly because you're probably also playing maybe some Eldrazi as well, and you need a lot of mana. So 12 mana probably not all that difficult for you to get to for this crazy good effect. Moving on, Don't Move. Source for 3 white. Destroy trap creatures until your next turn. Whenever a creature comes tapped, destroy it. That's quite funny. It is one that can take out a lot of things just on the get-go. It also can force your opponents not to attack in a way, essentially, as long as they don't have vigilance or whatnot. And then also, if you've got any kind of tap effects, which you probably do if you're utilizing this, you just take creatures out. Moving on, Sword of Forge and Frontier. Artifact equipment for 3 mana. Quick creatures plus +2 protection from red and green. A creature deals combat to a player. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play this card this turn. You play additional land this turn. Yeah, just extra card advantage, essentially temporary card advantage, and actually ramp as well in a way. So yeah, very, very, very effective doing 2 things players love to do in Commander. And then I believe finally, there we go. All 60 cards on this list I've gotten through. Here we go. Tyrdex Rex, 8/8 Phyrexian Dinosaur for 7 mana in total in mono green. The spell can't be countered. Timmy's Love It, Trample Ward 4, Haste, Toxic 4. Yeah, again, this is one of those cards if you showed to someone like 30 years ago, they'd be like, what? Crawlworm is like a 6/4 for 6 mana. How did you get an 8/8 for 7 with so much upside? And it's like, that's just how Magic's evolved, apparently, where we've had power creep, upon power creep, and this is just like, hey, yeah, this is a crazy good card. Protects itself, swings right away, can't be countered, gets damage through, and then also just gives your opponents poison counters if that all wasn't enough. So a crazy good card. But now with that, this episode is coming to a close, so in the comments below, let me know your thoughts are on these cards. What was your favorite card from 2023? Was it in the most expensive cards? Mine weren't, because I don't play with expensive cards, really. I mean, I guess technically, like if a commander is the commander, I don't really count that as the price, but yeah, every other card in my deck is like sometimes like $1 or less, or like 50 cents or less for many of my decks out there too. So yeah, I'm not playing with these, but you might be. So yeah, let me know in the comments what your favorite ones are. What are you most excited about from 2024? And of course, as always, thanks again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.